faster than light was impossible until humans got impatient. Dr. Cassandra Thorne first saw a star die when she was 12 years old, staring through her grandmother's backyard telescope. That was worth more money than most people's automobiles. The supernova had occurred 4,000 years earlier, but the light was arriving at Earth, staining the dark sky with shades that shouldn't be. Her grandmother, a former astrophysicist, had simply gestured toward the dying star and told Cassandra something that would plague her for the remainder of her life. The universe is big and slow, darling. It's ancient history by the time we get here. 23 years had gone by since Cassandra stood amid the cold, clinical corridors of the Meridian Deep Space Research Facility, her grandmother's voice resonating through her mind while she reviewed the latest dispatches from the colony's off-world. 3 mining ships had disappeared approaching the Kepler system. The last transmission had been a garbled report of something big, maneuvering through the asteroid field. The ships disappeared by the time the distress came through back to Earth. 8 months earlier, the speed of light was not merely a universal constant. It was an imprisonment. Cassandra rubbed her temples, fighting off the headache that had become her constant companion since taking over the faster-than-light research division 6 months ago. The position had been a poison chalice, a career graveyard where promising scientists went to have their reputations slowly suffocated by impossible physics and unlimited funding for projects that would never work. Each other species throughout the galaxy had come to accept the basic reality that travel faster than light was not doable. The Zephyrians, an older race that had probed the cosmos for well over 10 millennia, had perfected the most sophisticated sublight engines known. They achieved 99.7% light speed, converting once decade-spanning voyages to just years. It was impressive, efficient, and completely unacceptable for a species as impatient as humanity. The Crystalline Collective had gone another way, cultivating a technology of quantum consciousness transmission that enabled them to project their minds over enormous distances virtually instantly while their physical bodies stayed frozen. It was a wonder of engineering, but it needed enormous infrastructure support and decades of setup for each voyage. Lest we forget, impressive, but far too slow for humans who wished to explore the galaxy the way their forebears had explored Earth. Even the mythic ethereal travelers, energy beings that had long ago outgrown physical form, were governed by the speed of light. They had been trained to be long-suffering, to plan on geologic time scales, to appreciate the slow waltz of celestial mechanics. Theirs was a great philosophy, and their wisdom enormous, but they had also traveled 3 million years just to span a single galactic arm. Humans had spent only just over a couple of centuries in space, and already they were going stir-crazy. Cassandra walked into her office and found her research assistant, Dr. Marcus Vale, hunched over a holographic terminal that presented the latest theoretical configurations of Alcubierre drives. The mathematics churning through the air around him seemed like the ravings of a mad god, equations that curled back upon one another and disappeared into quantum foam. "Did you have any luck with the exotic matter problem?" she asked, though she knew the answer from the way his shoulders slumped out. Marcus looked up, his dark eyes rimmed with the red of too much caffeine and too little sleep. "The energy requirements are still astronomical. We need to convert the entire mass of Jupiter into exotic matter just to move a single ship faster than light. And that's assuming we could create stable exotic matter in the first place, which we can't." Cassandra nodded, unfazed. The Alcubierre drive had been the most promising FTL idea humanity had had for over a century, but it stubbornly stayed theoretical. The drive would function by folding spacetime inward in front of a ship while unfurling it behind, creating a bubble of warp spacetime that would travel faster than light, without breaking relativity. The ship would never travel faster than light itself. It would just surf the tide of compressed spacetime like a surfer rides a tidal wave. The issue was that sustaining and creating such a wave needed exotic matter with negative energy density, something that may not even exist and certainly couldn't be synthesized with available technology. All efforts at producing even microscopic quantities of exotic matter had ended in spectacular failures, most often involving explosions that had forced the evacuation of entire research centers. "What about the wormhole project?" Cassandra asked, though she suspected she knew the answer to. Marcus motioned towards another exhibit demonstrating the bent geometry of mathematically traversable wormholes. "Same issue, with a twist. We can make miniature wormholes back at the lab that will hold for nanoseconds, but not anything longer. The energy inputs to make a wormhole of human proportions are roughly equivalent with the production of a new star." Cassandra sank into her chair and stared out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, human colonies were struggling with problems that could be solved with technology and expertise that existed right here on Earth, but the distance between worlds, was measured in years, not miles. A breakthrough in fusion technology discovered on Mars wouldn't reach the colonies around Proxima Centauri for over 4 years. A medical emergency in the outer system might as well be happening in another universe. There has to be another way, she murmured, almost to herself. Not to Marcus. Cass, we've tried all of them. Alcubierre drives. Wormholes that are traversable, tachyon manipulation, quantum tunneling. What if we're doing the whole thing wrong? Marcus raised his eyes from his equations. What do you mean? Cassandra stood and began pacing, her mind racing. Every FTL theory we've developed assumes that space-time is this fundamental, inviolable thing. We try to bend it, stretch it, fold it, tunnel through it, but we always treat it with respect. We assume it has rules that can't be broken, because it does have rules, Cass. The rules of physics aren't suggestions. But what if they are? Cassandra spun around to face him. What if the reason no other species has developed FTL isn't because it's impossible, but because they're all too polite to try the impolite solutions? Marcus's eyebrow shot up. Rude solutions. Think about it. Every species we've encountered has been around for thousands or millions of years. They've had time to develop wisdom, patience, respect for the natural order. They've learned to work within the constraints of physics because they've had eons to accept those constraints. And humans haven't. Humans have been in space for 200 years, Marcus. 200 years. We still think like the species that looked at an ocean and said, I wonder what's on the other side. Instead of I guess we'll never know. We're the species that invented flight because we were tired of not being able to fly. We split the atom because we were curious about what was inside. We went to the moon because it was there. Marcus settled back in his chair. You're suggesting that we're specifically designed to break the laws of physics. Just because we're impatient, I'm proposing we're the only ones who can violate the laws of physics. Because we're too young and dumb not to know we shouldn't. The idea that had been forming in Cassandra's mind was so audacious, so fundamentally reckless, that it made her pulse quicken with equal parts excitement and terror. Every FTL theory they developed had been based on working within the framework of general relativity, finding clever ways to bend the rules without breaking them. But what if that was the problem? What if we stopped trying to function through the process? She asked, her voice little over a whisper. What if we simply break through it? Marcus stared at her. Bore through spacetime, not through spacetime, through reality itself. The resulting silence was complete, and Cassandra heard the thrum of the fusion reactors powering the complex 3 decks below. The expression on Marcus's face had gone from skeptical through worried to something approaching alarm. Cass, you're talking about. I mean, the energy requirements alone would be. Forget energy requirements. Forget tidy answers. Forget playing by the rules. Cassandra was pacing again, her hands waving as she described. What if we designed a drive simply to blast a hole from a point of space here to a point of space? There, no wormhole, no folded spacetime, just an outright force tunnel through the dimensional barrier from here to there. The dimensional barrier, every piece of space has a dimensional address, right? Coordinates in 3's dimensional space plus time. What if those coordinates aren't just descriptions but actual barriers? What if the reason FTL is impossible isn't because of the speed of light, but because reality itself has walls between different locations? Marcus was silent for a long time, and Cassandra saw him working out sums in his mind. Even if that were the case, the energy required to blast a hole through the underlying fabric of reality would be. We don't know that. We've never attempted it. We've had centuries of trying to be smart, trying to come up with an elegant answer that fits the laws of physics. What if the answer isn't smart at all? What if it is simply brute force, just applied in the right manner? The more Cassandra thought about it, the more it made sense. Each advanced civilization they'd encountered had developed sophisticated, graceful solutions to the problem of travel from star to star. They'd had millennia to perfect their techniques, with which to learn how to function within the parameters of the cosmos. But what if those parameters were simply conventions? What if the cosmos was like a house with people having entered through the front door long enough that they could not even conceive the thought of windows? I'll have to crunch some numbers, Marcus said finally. What you're suggesting, if it is even a theoretical foundation, would require an entire rethinking of our way of handling dimensional mechanics. Cassandra had a burst of hope. If Marcus was going on about running numbers rather than describing the reason something couldn't be done, then they were seriously considering the concept. For the remainder of the next 3 months, they worked secretly. The official faster-than-light research division continued its dignified failure with wormhole mathematics and Alcubierre drives, but back in a secluded lab in the deepest, lowest sublevel of the complex. Cassandra and Marcus began the development of what they satirically called the reality punch drive. The theoretical framework was almost insultingly simple, compared to the elegant complexity of Alcubierre mathematics. Instead of trying to contract spacetime, they would simply create a localized region of extreme dimensional instability. Instead of folding space, they would tear a hole through it. Instead of riding waves of warped spacetime, they would step through a doorway that shouldn't exist. The engineering hurdles were tremendous, but they were the right sort of hurdles that had always been humanity's specialty. Rather than needing exotic matter with unattainable properties, the reality punch drive would utilize regular matter placed in impossible circumstances. Rather than needing the energy of a star, it would require the energy of a star delivered upon a specific circumstance for an exceedingly short period. It's like the difference between folding a piece of paper into a Klein bottle versus cutting a hole through it with scissors. Marcus told Cassandra while going over their first workable, theoretical model. We've tried doing origami with the universe when we needed a box cutter. The math was ugly, with discontinuities and singularities that made conventional physicists cry. But it worked. On their simulations, a reality punch drive would produce a stable tunnel through dimensional space that would permit instantaneous movement from any point A to any point B in the cosmos. Energy would be stupendous, but not prohibitive, and the engineering obstacles would be the sort that would be overcome with sufficient funds, time, and imaginative use of controlled explosions. They had assembled their first prototype in a room-sized test chamber, a superconducting ring and magnetic field generator maze that resembled the inner organs of some mechanical deity. The test was simple: attempt punching a hole from one end of the room through the other, some 10 meters. The first try incinerated half the gear and invoked the radiation alarms over 3 levels of the installation. The second try made a hole that lasted precisely 3 nanoseconds before folding up and taking the remainder of the gear with it. The third try blasted a hole through the wall of the chamber and through the cafeteria next door, where it came momentarily attached to some point in the facility's waste handling infrastructure, before folding up with a sound that was like the sound of reality hiccups. We're definitely on the right track, Marcus said, looking at the hole in the wall that still smelled faintly of industrial cleaning solution. It took 6 more months to build a prototype that could create stable holes lasting more than a few seconds. The breakthrough came when Cassandra realized that the dimensional tunnel wasn't trying to collapse. It was trying to expand. Instead of fighting the instability, they learned to control it, using magnetic fields and carefully timed energy pulses to keep the tunnel at exactly the right size. Their first successful test carried a coffee mug from one end of the laboratory to the other almost instantaneously. The mug came through intact and still warm, though it had acquired an unearthly blue glow that would take some hours to fade. More important, the tunnel had lasted for nearly 30 seconds before collapsing. We did it, Marcus whispered, his eyes upon the coffee mug like it was the Holy Grail. Actually did it. But Cassandra was already thinking about the next challenge. Now we need to scale it up. In order to create a reality punch drive big enough for a spacecraft, they needed something beyond larger magnets and stronger generators. The mathematics of the dimensions increasingly became exponentially complex. With larger tunnel sizes, and the energy demands increased proportionally, they would require a fusion reactor engineered specifically toward releasing massive amounts of energy in precisely calibrated bursts, magnetic field generators handling the theoretical limits of material science, and a computer complex able to compute dimensional coordinates in real time. The project couldn't be kept undercover much longer. They would require resources, expertise, and formal support. More significantly, they would need to try the drive on something bigger than laboratory gear. Cassandra decided to go straight to Director Elena Vasquez. Vasquez had commanded the Meridian Deep Space Research Facility for well over a decade, and she had a reputation for favoring unorthodox research. She also, facility gossip had it, was being pushed by the Global Space Council to produce tangible results towards FTL research, or else the program would be cancelled outright. The presentation was made in Vasquez's office, a clinical room with a window looking out over the facility's central particle accelerator. Cassandra and Marcus had put together a presentation that outlined their theory, their test results, and their design for a full-scale prototype. They had prepared for skepticism, for requests that their paper be refereed by their peers, for criticism of their protective procedures. They did not anticipate Vasquez would recline back in her seat and begin laughing. "You'd like to poke holes through reality," Vasquez exclaimed when she ran out of laughter. "You'd like me to okay a project that handles the basic framework of spacetime, as if it were a piece of paper that can be cut with scissors." "The math checks out," argued Marcus. "Our test numbers speak for themselves." "I'm not laughing," It can't be done, Vasquez told him. I'm laughing because it just happens to be the most human method of traveling faster than light that I've ever heard. All the rest of the galaxy has tried for millions of years to come up with some elegant way of traveling faster than light. And the human sat back and stared at the problem for 2 centuries and exclaimed, "Screw elegance. Let's just rip reality apart." She leaned inward, her face stern. How long will it take to create a full-size prototype? With proper funding and resources. 18 months, Cassandra said. You have 12 months. And if this doesn't work, we're all going to be looking for new jobs. The next year was a blur of long days, the engineering of miracles that could not be, and moments of epiphanic inspiration that made Cassandra wonder. They were rewriting the laws of physics one equation set at a time. The complete reality punch drive was assembled in the largest test chamber back at the facility, a room that had once been earmarked for testing experimental fusion reactor prototypes. The drive itself was the length of a small building, an exquisitely complex assembly of superconducting rings, magnetic field generators, and fusion reactors that vibrated with just held-in-check power. The first test was to send an unmanned probe just beyond Earth orbit, about 200,000 kilometers. If the mathematics were right, the probe would get there at once. If they had botched it, the probe would be lost during transit or would end up somewhere entirely unexpected. The probe was a simple device, little more than a metal sphere packed with sensors and a communication array. It was painted bright orange and labeled Hello Universe in 12 different languages, because Cassandra figured that if they were going to accidentally destroy something with a hole in reality, it should at least be polite. The tunnel created with the sound of thunder played backwards. One instant there had been open space at the center of the drive ring. The next such an impermeable circle of pure darkness, surrounded by shimmering energy that the air itself appeared to ripple. Through the tunnel, they saw stars, not the stars that would be seen from Earth, but those stars that would be seen from a location 100,000 kilometers away. Go ahead and probe, said the control station technician. The orange ball disappeared into the tunnel and was gone from view. Nothing happened for a moment. Then the comms panel was alive with the probe's signal, broadcasting just outside Earth orbit exactly where it was intended to be. Transit time, 0.003 seconds, exclaimed Marcus, his voice trembling with elation. Tunnel stable, probe intact. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just punched a hole through reality. The celebration lasted exactly as long as it took for someone to notice that the tunnel wasn't collapsing. Close it down, Vasquez commanded. But the technicians were already frantically busy at their control consoles. We're attempting, but it isn't reacting to the shutdown sequence. Another reported. Magnetic field generators are functioning properly, but the tunnel is sustaining itself some way. The portal, initially set for a length of 30 seconds, had long crossed the 2-minute barrier and showed not even the flicker of movement. Towards shutting, better still, it was starting to expand. The perfect circle of darkness was expanding, and the release of energy around its edge was becoming increasingly chaotic. Emergency shutdown, Vasquez commanded. Power off the entire system. The lights flickered off. The rumble of machinery died, and the room was plunged into darkness. But the tunnel remained, an impossibly dark circle that seemed to draw light towards it while also exuding an energy that made the air taste of ozone and copper. How is it even open? Marcus whispered. Powerless, it will be falling instantly. Cassandra looked at the tunnel, her thoughts reeling. It's self-sustaining. As soon as we blew the hole, it began taking energy from the dimensional differential itself. It's not a tunnel anymore. It's a tier in reality, and it's sustaining itself off the universe's healing effort. They had done something never before, something none of the species of the galaxy had ever tried. They had literally bored a hole through the underlying constitution of reality itself. The issue was that reality did not exactly take too well to punching. The tunnel was increasing in diameter, growing from a circle to meters wide, then 3, then 4. The discharge of energy off its sides was growing wilder, shooting arcs of electricity through the room that scorched the walls with streaks of superheated material. Badly, the area around the tunnel was starting to warp, producing afterimages that stung the eyes not even to glance at. We need to have the facility evacuated, Vasquez said. If that thing continues growing, it can't, Cassandra interrupted. It won't. Mathematics doesn't permit indefinite expansion. It will stabilize at, she considered, working the numbers out, at roughly 7.2 meters diameter. She will. Maybe. The theoretical framework is rather clear on that. The tunnel ceased expanding at precisely 7.1 meters diameter. Close enough to Cassandra's estimate that she experienced a burst of professional pride, even while she thought about the remote chance that they had just ripped a permanent hole. Through the space-time continuum for 3 days, the tunnel remained steady, an ideal circular window beyond Earth orbit with a star field. The probe continued streaming from the far side of its orbit, confirming the tunnel was an operational transport system. But it was also a transport system that couldn't be turned off, couldn't be moved, couldn't be controlled. We've created the universe's first permanent faster-than-light transportation system, Marcus said on the third day, as they stood in the chamber staring at their impossible achievement. And we have absolutely no idea how to turn it off. Maybe we don't need to turn it off, Cassandra said. Maybe that is its design. She was pondering the meaning of what they'd constructed. A tunnel through space that would be permanent, not needing any continual energy input. That would move objects from point to point almost instantaneously over long distances. It wasn't what they'd set out to create, but perhaps humanity just needed something like that. Consider that, she went on. All our FTL theories have always presupposed that faster-than-light travel would be just like regular transportation. You climb aboard a ship, you travel somewhere, you end up somewhere else. But what if that doesn't even hold true? Like a highway system, or a network of bridges. You don't carry a bridge with you when you want to cross a river. You build the bridge, and then everyone can use it. He stared at the tunnel, and Cassandra watched him calculating the possibilities. You're suggesting a permanent network of interstellar transport tunnels. I'm talking about the solution to faster-than-light travel that every other species in the galaxy missed because they were trying to be elegant instead of practical. In a month, they had permission to construct a second reality punch drive. This one was engineered from the beginning specifically to make permanent tunnels, with protective measures designed not to allow accidental expansion and with communication means allowing coordination between separate tunnel endpoints. The second tunnel connected Earth with Proxima Centauri, the closest interstellar colony of the human race. The journey that had brought the pioneers for years in suspended animation would be achieved well beneath the second. The implications bewildered the mind. Word of the breakthrough traveled faster than light through human space, relayed via the expanding network of reality tunnels that bound Earth and its colonies. Other species reacted unevenly. The Zephyrians, who had spent 10,000 years perfecting their sublight engines, were initially skeptical. Their ambassador to Earth, a dignified being named Kethvar, attended a demonstration of the tunnel network with the air of someone humoring a child's fantasy. Your species has always been inventive in the way that you solve the unsolvable, Kethvar remarked politely, looking after the ship that had vanished through a tunnel and reappeared almost instantly at a point 8 light-years distant. But even you must be aware that such a rough-and-tumble method of moving through the dimensions will have unintended results. What kind of consequences? Cassandra questioned. The kind that other species have avoided by not blasting their way through. The cosmos like marauders. In spite of their distrust of diplomats, the Zephyrians had evidently been impressed. They had asked for permission to use the tunnel complex for their transportation purposes. Just a year later, Cassandra couldn't help but laugh at the thought that humanity's crude method of going FTL had become the most efficient transport available throughout the galaxy. The Crystalline Collective had a more straightforward answer. Their quantum consciousness transfer technology, the ultimate pinnacle of interstellar travel for millennia, was instantly rendered useless. Why wait decades to be ready for a consciousness transfer, when you can walk through a tunnel and be there in an instant, with your body intact? We have observed your reality puncture system with great interest, announced 6 Prime, the Collective's primary consciousness interface. Your species' approach to dimensional barriers is novel. New how? Marcus asked. You grasp the essential structure of space-time as if it can be circumvented by an application of force sufficiently great. This was not something we had thought of, and while it has crossed your mind, we would like to order 17,000 reality tunnels for our interstellar network. Even the ethereal wanderers, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form millions of years ago, were intrigued by humanity's achievement. They manifested in the Meridian facility as shimmering columns of light that spoke in harmonics that bypassed human ears and communicated directly with their brains. Young species, they said. Their voice, like the sounds of music played upon instruments that did not exist. You have achieved something we thought to be impossible. You never tried punching holes through reality? Cassandra questioned. We didn't take into account punching holes through reality as a reasonable way of addressing the issue of faster-than-light travel. Why not? Since punching holes through reality would be rude. In 2 years, the reality tunnel net had joined all the significant human colonies and most of the minor ones. Journeys that had once lasted years lasted seconds. Economic and social changes were revolutionary. Humankind had progressed from distinct island-like clusters of civilization with enormous gaps between them to an actually interconnected species. For the first time ever, the network continued to expand as more species requested access to humanity's crude but effective transportation system. The elegant civilizations that had spent millions of years developing sophisticated approaches to interstellar travel were suddenly dependent on a network of holes punched through reality by the galaxy's youngest and most impatient species. Cassandra stood in the control room of the Meridian Complex, staring at screens that revealed traffic through hundreds of reality tunnels scattered throughout the galaxy. Cargo vessels, passenger vessels, even emissaries from worlds long dead, were moving through humanity's net from world to world faster than it would take the eye to flicker. Do you ever think about what your grandmother would say if she could see this? Marcus asked, joining her at the observation window. Cassandra smiled, recollecting the night sky of her childhood and the phrases that had formed the basis of her entire career. She said the universe was slow and big, and by the time we'd see anything interesting, it would already be ancient history. And now, we don't have to wait for the universe to bring interesting things to us. We can punch holes through reality and go find them ourselves. A new gauge appeared on the screens, representing traffic through the tunnel connecting Earth with the Andromeda Galaxy. Mankind's tunnel of reality had grown past the Milky Way, branching forth with links with other galaxies and creatures that would have never considered faster than light travel. The other species are calling us tunnel builders now, Marcus said. Did you know that? Better than we'd be known as the reality vandals, Cassandra said. Are we? Vandals, I mean. Cassandra thought about the question while she observed a transport ship from Zephyr come out of a tunnel that joined to spots more than 30,000 light-years apart. The voyage, which would have taxed their fastest sublight engines 100,000 years, had been accomplished in 0.003 seconds. I don't believe vandalism is the term for it, she said at last. Vandalism is aimless destruction. We didn't break the barriers between worlds, we merely made them voluntary. The reality tunnel network had grown into something far beyond what Cassandra and Marcus had originally imagined. It wasn't just a transportation system. It was a fundamental change in how intelligent species related to the universe itself. Distance, the great isolator that had kept civilizations separate for millions of years, had become a minor inconvenience that could be overcome by stepping through a hole in reality. The ramifications extended far beyond travel. Scientific breakthroughs achieved on one world might be transmitted instantaneously to scientists on remote worlds. Communication between species split by thousands of light years was reduced to the matter of taking a short stroll. Medical emergency provisions might be transported to emergency sites prior to the emergency ending. But most of all, the tunnel network of the reality tunnel had demonstrated something that had never occurred to any other race throughout the galaxy. The rules of the universe were guidelines rather than rules. And with enough will and total disrespect for received wisdom, even the most basic laws of physics might be viewed as obstacles to be transgressed rather than boundaries to be tolerated. You know what I think the real breakthrough was? Cassandra asked while they observed traffic through the tunnels. It wasn't the mathematics, the engineering, or even the energy demand. What was it? It was too young and impatient to know that punching holes through the fabric of reality was not allowed. The ethereals had had every right to deem Earth-descended species rude. Other beings throughout the galaxy had had millions of years of practice working out how to behave within the confines of physics, building complex solutions that respected the underlying order of the cosmos. They had achieved great things below those limits, building civilizations that stretched between star systems, technologies that verged upon the miraculous. But they had all assumed that faster-than-light travel was not possible simply because the universe told them so. Humans had examined the rules of the universe and thought that's nice. But we're going to do it anyway. The network of reality tunnels kept growing, linking worlds and species throughout the galaxy and elsewhere. Old civilizations that had never thought they'd travel faster than light were now part of an interconnected net that rendered the enormous gaps between stars null and void. And at the heart of the whole thing was a humble notion that had crossed the mind of an impatient human scientist. Too impatient to just abide by the fact that the universe was big and slow. If going around an impediment isn't an option, and if going over it or going under isn't an option, then the next best choice is frequently just punching a hole through the middle of it and sorting out the repercussions afterward. The fallout, as it turned out, was that the galaxy was a far smaller, more cohesive world, and the species came to be thought of as the one that had solved faster-than-light travel, less by adroit mathematics and sophisticated engineering, but by the simple act of resorting to the use of brute force upon problems that all the rest had considered unsolvable. It was, Marcus reflected, A very human solution to a universal problem. And it worked. Years afterward, when Cassandra was presented the Galactic Council's highest award for scientific contribution, her acceptance speech was concise. She thanked her team, recognized the input of the numerous species that had helped grow the network, and closed by quoting her grandmother. "The universe is vast and slow," she said to an audience that included representatives from over 100 different worlds. But that's only a problem if you're too polite to punch holes through it. The applause that followed was audible across dimensional barriers, transmitted through a network of reality tunnels that connected civilizations across the cosmos. It was the sound of a galaxy that had discovered that some rules were meant to be broken, and that sometimes the most impossible problems had the simplest solutions. All you had to do was be impatient enough to try them.